It's Lingard, isn't it? Because just 10 minutes earlier, when he was warming up,
at least
it was Jesse Lingard. He wants to come home.
The Fantasy Football Show.
Hello everybody and welcome to Planet FPL, the world where everything revolves around Fantasy Premier League. My name's Serge.
And my name is James.
And game week 5 has passed, and that was that.
That's it. Move on.
It was one of those average weeks. You know, I reckon probably half of the season you have a week which is just, stuck with the average. A lot of people had similar players that returned. Move on.
Similar captains going to mean similar scores, and
yes,
I'm going to guess the majority of the listeners would have captained Mo Salah. I'm sure there was some Cristiano Ronaldo and perhaps a few other alternatives. Mainly Ferran Torres, I heard, was a few people, but not many. Yeah, as you are. Perhaps from Trent as well. But the vice captains obviously come into play. So
yeah, that Rudiger goal at the end of your game was the biggest game changer for me because I don't own Rudiger. So in terms of my mini league rivals and all of that kind of stuff, that Rudiger goal ended up being a 7 pointer. I was 3, 4, 5 points ahead of a lot of people. They ended up being 2, 3, 4 points ahead of me at the end.
He's not heavily owned, Rudiger.
No, but in some of my mini leagues he is.
Okay.
So that Rudiger goal was it. But apart from that, I ended the week on 60 points, which is above average, but not great. But also I'll take it, and ended up being a green arrow of 20,000 spaces, 477,000 from 455. But my first red arrow of the season, it's fine.
First red?
Yeah, first red arrow of the season.
Shows how shit you started, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, 1.3 million got up to now 477, but I feel quite comfortable. I had returns from Ben White and Mo Salah, obviously, as captain. Ivan Toney doing bits finally, and Cristiano Ronaldo. So really only 4 returnees.
You rolled a transfer, didn't you?
I did roll a transfer.
Yeah.
And quite luckily, and I had Brandon Williams, lovely, coming off the bench for Trent, obviously. So that was a bit of a disappointment.
He's got 0, didn't he?
Got 0. So I'm going in this week with 2 free transfers and
I tipped loads of people to buy him on my deadline stream.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, fancy them this week. You probably won't get a Norwich positive prediction from me again for a while.
For the rest of the season, I would say.
Might be a while.
So 60 points is fine. It keeps me there or thereabouts. And going into this week with wildcard still in my pocket and 2 free transfers is giving me a lot of options, actually. I'm almost to the point where I might take a hit this week and make 3 transfers or decide what direction I'm going in now. Because a lot of options and opportunities making themselves available.
So you're thinking of pulling it, aren't you?
Maybe. It's something we'll talk about in a sec. We'll talk about it in a sec, and I'll tell you my...
I would like you to have already done it if you were going to do it.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And that's why I'm only 30 to 40% likely. But it's increasing. So next week might be 60, 70% likely. The week after, definitely almost likely. I would have pulled it by then. So interesting to think about.
Just to clarify my comment there, when I say if I'd have wanted you to do it, I mean as in this week, i.e. pulled the trigger.
Pulled it already on Saturday.
Friday night this week.
Yeah, Friday this week.
To get all the price rises Friday night and stuff,
correct.
Which is... It's always difficult because if you have problems kind of develop and evolve during a weekend that you're not expecting, then obviously fine. I understand that. There's certainly no faults for me to do it. I had a better than expected week in the end, which included something on Friday which basically never happens to me, which was a last minute transfer. Mm-hmm. Since I've been doing the deadline streams, which dates back to the restart period on YouTube, we've never done a transfer during stream ever. But I did on this one with about 15 minutes to go before the deadline because I'd got confirmation that Rafinha was going to play. So on Friday there was these massive rumours going around about Jack Harrison and Rafinha, potential COVID spread in the Leeds camp. I was like, what's going on here? So I stuck with Thursday night. Obviously Ricardo Pereira didn't play for Leicester. And Aaron Lager was messaging me, my Leicester correspondent. He was going, Pereira looked good, warming up down the touchline. I think he might be good to go Sunday, taking the piss out of me. I'm like, nah, I've already decided he's going to go. So I sold him for Kieran Tierney. it left me with Harrison. So I knew that Ayling was coming in for the team for me. And what I decided, when I was concluding, if Harrison's out, do I want to take a -4 to get rid? Because that was the first rumour I heard. My decision was, I'm going to take a -4 for Rafinha. And within about 2 minutes of me making that decision of, that's what I think I will do, it was, Rafinha's very doubtful for tonight as well. And I think we can probably look at it conclusively afterwards and say, actually probably played injured. It's not to say he's definitely out for this coming week against West Ham, but he probably played with a problem. The fact he came off after about 65 minutes or so. So I decided, right, sorry, I'm just going to go with it. I've got Luke Ayling. There's nothing I can see there that makes me think, I'm definitely going to get a 4-point advantage over that. And I looked at the rest of my team and thought, they're all going to play, which they did, bar Trent, who obviously woke up Saturday morning and didn't feel well, and that shit can happen. But then I got the news about half hour into my stream that Rafinha was definitely going to play from a few reliable sources. And I was like, do you know what? That was my first instinct. I'm going to do it. So I brought him in, and the -4 worked out wonderfully for me, because even though I fancied Leicester for a clean sheet this week and didn't fancy Arsenal for one, although I thought they'd both win. Obviously, Tierney picked up the clean sheet, Pereira didn't. And Rafinha, obviously, I needed that because I would have been down to 10 players. So, I mean, the two of them got me, 14 points. Was worth a good 13 points or so. We take away the 4, was like an extra 9 points or so. So it worked out really lovely for me. And I really didn't want to take a hit this week, having done the same the previous week, but it worked out, even if Rafinha's injured. To be honest, if Rafinha's injured, it actually probably solves the problem for me, because what I want to do next, ideally I want to roll this week, and then next week I want to move one of the midfielders, Jota, Greenwood, Barnes or Rafinha, for a 4.5 mid, and then move Danny Ings to Lukaku. That's what I want to do. But obviously, if Rafinha's going to be out for a while, it makes the choice easy, isn't it? It's just him that will go.
It shows the fickle nature of FPL, and why even people listen to us. We never claim to be FPL experts or particularly good, to be honest with you.
Not.
But it really shows how it's such a changing, moving space, because that very morning we recorded a podcast on Friday about midfielders 5.4 to 5.9, and ironically you ended that pod saying that I think Harrison could be score as many as Gallagher in the next 4-6 weeks.
No intention of saying
that was 9:30 10 a.m. right?
Yeah.
And then obviously the news breaks later on, and you tweeted your team, I'm locked, Ayling's there to replace Harrison.
I even tweeted in it, Ayling's there to replace Harrison, yeah.
And then you tweet, and then obviously Rafinha scored. I'm like, you know what, at the end of the day, it's glad that it's worked out in that sense. But it just goes to show how we can plan as much as we want, and we can think we know as much as we want, and still it's particularly difficult. The reason I'm not tempted to pull my wild card is I'm looking at it, and it's always a case of, like, if you want to make 4 or 5 changes, that's when it gets to wildcard territory, right? So that's when it's like suddenly, it's probably worth it. And there are 4 or 5 players that I'd like to move on in my team, but also none of them are what I'd call a problem. But if I was to wildcard today, I would be selling Luke Ayling, potentially. I don't know what his injury status is. I'd like to know a little bit more.
Unconfirmed, but I would say Ayling is probably less likely to play this weekend than Rafinha, just judging on the way the two players left the pitch. I think Luke Ayling has played every minute since Leeds got promoted as well, so he's not the sort of player that comes off right.
Luke Shaw is on the chopping block, but although he had a difficult game yesterday, but then he on the left-hand side, Soufal is a good right-back, and we played Fornals on the right to double up, so he's not going to get a lot of space in that West Ham game. You can't really look at it.
See a lot of people talking about leaving Luke Shaw.
But only because
it might be a couple of weeks early. If you're on wildcard, fair enough. They've got 2 home games.
I don't have a Chelsea defender, and I don't have Cancelo, and those two, so they're wants more than they are needs.
They're playing each other this weekend. How desperate are you for it?
Mason Mount obviously came off at half-time in your game yesterday. Since I've owned him for 2 weeks, he's been a bit of a disappointment.
But then you've got one more game until the brilliant fixture run. I understand you might not be happy with that Chelsea player right now.
Harvey Barnes.
Yeah, get it. But then they've got a brilliant fixture this week, going to Burnley, right? And he
Jota
has looked progressively better every game, actually.
Yeah, Jota is a risk at some point.
Jota's ridiculous, because Jota probably should have been the highest scoring player over the last 2 game weeks.
And then my front line, I need to free up money. At some point, Ronaldo to Lukaku is a transfer on the cards. But if I think about it and say, like, I'm going to sell Ayling and Shaw and buy Cancelo and Rudiger. I'm going to sell Mount and Jota and buy Conor Gallagher and another. And Ronaldo goes to Lukaku. Those are all aggressive moves. I'm proactive, not fixing problems necessarily. And I've never really played a wild card in that way before. And that's why I was 30% tempted. I'm like, am I in a position where I can actually be aggressive with my wild card rather than need it to fix 3 or 4 problems? All the things you've mentioned there are holding me back a little bit here. And that's probably why I'm not going to do it this week. I feel like I'm 1 week too early to really capitalise on fixture swings and be aggressive. And we've seen this weekend how ridiculous the injury information that we're getting from pressers and stuff is, which is why I've taken the view that there's something inside me that's getting closer and closer. I think it builds up. That pulling the trigger on wildcard. You probably see it on Twitter where suddenly someone's like, fuck it, I've pulled the trigger. It's because it's not like they sit down rationally, what's the pros and cons? I think you look at it and you're like, I'm tempted. Then you look at it a bit more and, I'm even more tempted. Then you keep looking at it and eventually you get to the point where you've built up that momentum to pull the trigger on the wild card. And that's what's happening with me at the moment, is that I'm looking at, I've got no Chelsea defender. City have just kept 4 clean sheets on the trot. Jota's going to lose his place at some point. He'll still score points and still get minutes, but he's going to be a rotation problem that I don't really want in my squad. And the Ronaldo to Lukaku switch is getting ever nearer. So I'm working towards, this is where the direction that I think I'm going to end up pulling my wild card. And to do that is a good reason to pull the wild card, to get in strong defenders and so on.
I'm going to tell you that you're not going to pull your wild card.
Not this week.
No, I was going to say not this week.
Yeah, I don't think this week it's likely to happen. Also because I look at it and I've got 2 free transfers. Plus, I'm happy to take a hit. So my basic, simple, easy move.
You got 5 problems, right? I've sure you listed probably 5 transfers.
Luke Shaw's not a problem.
Well, exactly 5 transfers you want to make. Luke Shaw's got 2 home games to come. Villa
Cristiano
and Everton.
Ronaldo's not a problem.
Exactly.
Mason Mount is a problem. Luke Ayling is a upgrade I'd like to make to a Chelsea or City.
This isn't enough to wildcard.
No, but I am moving closer towards understanding what kind of squad I want. I definitely want 4 solid defenders. So Shaw, Trent, Ben White and Rudiger, and Shaw can go for Cancelo. 3, Salah and a Ronaldo or Lukaku. Antonio stays for me. Ivan Toney stays for me. And then a couple of other mid-price midfielders that can get me returns. Rafinha and Gallagher, for example, would be great.
I'm 2 transfers to 2, as kind of said. 1 midfielder down to a 4.5. Danny Ings up to Lukaku. I'm 2 transfers from being where I want to be. 4-4-2. That's where I want to get to. I mean, the week went well for me in the end. 68 minus 4. Actually, green arrow up to 178k. I really, once I took the hit, I wasn't expecting the green arrow. It was more, it opened up the possibility for me to move Harrison to Rafinha as well. I didn't want to make the move and take away all my Leeds coverage as well. So I wanted to be in a position. Part of the reason why I originally decided to keep Harrison was I didn't want to be in a position where suddenly I got to 7 and that's the Chelsea entry point for Lukaku. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't got no Leeds. So that's why I'd made the decision, okay, look, let's keep Harrison. Even if he's out for 2 weeks, I've got the coverage. Then it opened back up for Rafinha. I was like, we discussed on that podcast on Friday morning about one of the reasons people probably wouldn't go to Harrison was A, the returns hadn't been there so far, plus there wasn't enough of a differential in price to justify going him over Rafinha.
Yep.
Therefore, it opened up for me to go, do you know what? You can't think, oh my God, I've had Harrison for 5 weeks, it's not worked. The opportunity came there to upgrade. All I needed to do was double check in my mind that it still allowed me the next 2 moves. That's where my Sky Fantasy thinking comes into play. Understanding what's the next couple of transfers. Okay, yes, before I pull the trigger, yes, I can still afford it, do it. But, I mean, I'm not quite sure how I scored so... Well, I do know how I scored so highly. Partly that fucking Rudiger goal at the end of the game yesterday. I had Kieran Tierney clean sheet. Rafinha's goal was just... I've had 5 returnees. The 2 players I brought in for a -4 were 2 of them, Tierney and Rafinha. Rudiger's 14. Danny Ings assist. Mo Salah captaincy. That's it. That's got me to net 64.
Yeah.
And if I'd done nothing, I would have been on, I think, 55.
Yeah.
So, good week, no complaints.
Let's touch on a couple other quick topics before we can give you a rundown of all the games as we do each and every Monday as well. Firstly, pressers. It's a frustration because I've seen it for a lot of managers this weekend where they've got their fingers burnt by lack of injury news or incorrect injury news. No one saw Mendy out. I think Mendy was a hurt more in Sky for people than it was FPL, potentially
Loads
because
of people bought him
the Pickford
yesterday.
to Mendy yesterday was horrible. So that was unexpected. Trent, I mean, look, if he's sick on Saturday, he's sick on Saturday, but that was disappointment. And
There's nothing you can do
Robbo
about it. I mean, Klopp explained that. He said
Yeah.
after breakfast, he was like, I don't feel right, so they just pulled him out.
put
of
him
the
out.
team.
And
That's it.
Robbo was nowhere to be seen. Oh, he's on the bench when so that was rotation or
I think
resting him.
Andy at Let's Talk had a tip-off on Friday that Shimikas was going to play, apparently in his stream, because he still owned Shimikas and he played him, I think.
Yeah. Benrahma was quoted by Moyes as having a knock, but ended up playing comfortably for the vast majority of the game. I almost feel like for Moyes, it's the second week in a row where he's got no injuries. So it was like, what can I talk about? Let me just chuck that out there because I've got to say something because I can't keep coming here and saying nothing. And that was a bit of a nonsense. And then Benitez.
Well, I stuck up for Benitez last week because it was obviously last Monday night. There was obviously a lot of people even taking -4s going into game week 4 to get Calvert-Lewin in. There was the pictures that went round on Thursday, the obvious photograph of him training, going for a header up with Ben Godfrey, who'd been back fit. Everton had captioned it in terms of Godfrey's fit, and just Calvert-Lewin's there going for a header with him. So you absolutely assume it's definitely a current picture. Calvert-Lewin's been training, and I thought there was a possibility from what Benitez had been saying that Calvert-Lewin may have got injured on the Saturday after or in the morning at around about the deadline, certainly after his Friday press conference, and therefore there was nothing he could say. So I stuck up for him a bit last week. I can't stick up for him this week.
No.
So clearly he knew that Pickford, Coleman and Richarlison were not going to play at Aston Villa, and it's not really on. I think this will get looked at because it's just. You could say, why do managers have to be honest? It's not a good look for the Premier League.
No.
The Premier League will be knocking, and they can't enforce it, but they'll be knocking on the door going, look, come on, there's no point in doing this if you're just going to blatantly hide the fact that 3 of your players are injured. I mean, there's certain ones with... what's the point in hiding your goalkeeper's injured anyway? Okay, you can change a goalkeeper. Would it make Villa go, right, Begovic is in goal instead of Pickford, we're going to put more pressure on the goalkeeper?
Play El Ghazi and let him just
Actually,
shoot.
it doesn't make
Fucking
any real difference. You could make a case it might have changed Tottenham a little bit strategically yesterday, but I'm sure in the dressing room before the game, they've gone, well, Kepa's in goal. Like, they know the data like the rest of us. If you're 25 yards from goal and you've got a chance to shoot. Because the fair chances Kepa's saving from long distance shots is a problem. You don't need to hide that information. It's a little bit strange, particularly with the goalkeeper ones, to keep under wraps. So I think the Premier League will probably be knocking on the door and going, hang on, there's a few here. The ones that are really awkward, like say in Tottenham's case, I really thought that Son would be available and most of the Tottenham players would be available. In that case, I get it because the official press conference is actually on the Thursday night after the game, so it would have been the case in David Moyes and Brendan Rodgers as well. And obviously, a lot of that's part of their pre-presser for the weekend is the interview straight afterwards. And obviously, the media guys who do the reporting they basically want what was your reaction to the game. And obviously, in Tottenham's case, there was a lot of because Lucas and Bergwijn got injured on Thursday night. What's wrong with Lucas Bergwijn? There wasn't follow-ups to is Heung-min Son available for Sunday. Nobody asked Nuno that question. And it's not to say he probably would have said, we've got some issues, you know what he's like as well. But the wrong questions from an FPL perspective are then getting asked. If there's particular incidents in that Thursday game, it goes in a different direction. And some of these pressers, like the right questions are just not getting asked. So, I mean, I couldn't find on Friday any information on Brentford at all in terms of team news. And there was none to actually give, as it turned out. But Thomas Frank had his press conference at 11 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, I'm looking around for anything news on Brentford. Can't find nothing.
Yeah, it's something to bear in mind. I just think I make decisions based on like trying to piece the the pieces of the jigsaw together myself a little bit, rather than overthinking what managers are saying, and be patient. And it does stress the importance of your bench and making sure you do have some cover going forward. And COVID's the one that is still a big problem. As much as it's died down, you just can't see it coming. So,
well, it just quite literally, if a player gets COVID, he's not going to play.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's not like it's under control in any way, shape, or form. It's still pretty contagious and out there. So yeah, interesting. And the other one that we should mention, and we will talk more in detail about him on Tottenham for the patrons as well, is obviously sad passing of Greavesy yesterday, 81 years old. And I think transcended football a lot because of his just character, and St. Greavesy in late 80s. It was just the one that was always funny. It was an entertaining show, and he had a great character. And obviously Spurs was his main club where he played the majority of his games, so really important for you. But he did play for Chelsea on the same day, so how fitting that where he started and where he played were playing each other, and we were playing on the same day as well. Just from a West Ham point of view, is interesting. They obviously put it on the screen. The players got around the circle. They put his picture on screen, and before the ref had blown his whistle, or the announcer had even said, "We're blah blah blah," the late passing, everyone was just clapping.
It was the same at Tottenham, yeah.
And that was it. So the ref's like, "All right, I don't need to do anything here."
Yeah.
Clapped for a minute, he blew his whistle, and that was it. And I think it just goes to show, like, people didn't need to be told. That was it. He was one that was bigger than a club allegiance, and he transcended football quite well. So sad to see that he passed away as well.
The greatest goal scorer in English top flight history. Fact.
As a goals per game ratio?
No, just goals scored.
Okay.
No one scored more than him in England's top flight ever. You go back to Dixie Dean days in the 1920s and stuff. Doesn't matter. Jimmy Greaves got more.
Wow.
In England's top flight.
Says it all.
Got about 100 more top flight goals than Alan Shearer. Who's obviously the Premier League. I think the statistic I saw yesterday as well was only in Europe's top 5 leagues, only Ronaldo and Messi scored more. And he only scored about 9 goals for AC Milan, right? During a very short spell there. He only played about 11, 12 times for AC Milan. Still about 0.75 goal ratio, by the way. His goal ratio was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
My dad would stand firm and say he was as good as any of them, including those 2 modern day greats. Wasn't anything he couldn't do. Everything was composure. You hear the ex-pros saying all the time, everything was finesse. He didn't power it. I saw a comment from Jim for a few years ago last night where he said he had to get a curved TV because he always used to curl the ball into the corner, very rarely finished with power. He used to glide across these pitches that were often mud heaps and stuff. Arguably the most gracious centre forward in the history of football. And obviously, from my perspective, Tottenham Hotspur was my club's greatest ever goal scorer.
Yeah.
I was properly upset yesterday morning, mainly for my dad, because I knew he would. And obviously, I saw him and I was like, oh, we're both going to fucking cry, it's obvious. And he said, nah, I've done my crying, I'm fine. I was like, you poor bastard, man, it's horrible. Yeah. Unfortunately, people pass on. And Jim
years old was a good age.
Jim had not been well for 5 plus 6 years. And I'm kind of glad he's at peace now and he's somewhere better. He can go and play football and take the piss out of people again. Incredible. No one's got a bad word to say.
No.
100%. And something else, obviously, that kind of came out is kind of revolutionised a little bit the beginning of almost this. St. Greavesy.
Yeah.
In the 90s or late 80s and early 90s was kind of the first, I wouldn't call it analysis of stuff, but kind of football preview show that was on the TV. It was laid back. It was fun. Everybody watched it. You didn't have the 12:30 games that used to be on before the 3 o'clocks.
So the interesting thing for me when I watched it, because I was still young and I wasn't in a football family, is I didn't know Greavesy as a player, but he was still Greavesy. So he still had that character. For me, it was like, okay, had I known that he was one of the greatest ever, as well as from a football point of view, it had an even more understanding resonance. But yeah, sad that he passed, and obviously, we'll share some more memories in Tottenham when we've got a bit more time to talk about it, because obviously your dad got to see him so often as well. But yeah, nice to see how he was remembered everywhere this weekend as well as yesterday.
Given there'll be more to come. England said they're going to do stuff next month as well.
Of course, good. Should we talk about some of these games?
Yeah, let's do that, mate.
Indeed, and we'll wrap up. If anybody's waiting for the Tottenham and West Ham, ironically and conveniently, they were the last two. Kind of, sort of. Ours was at the same time as
Can't wait.
But it was a drama of all dramas. So yeah, we'll get to those slowly and surely. And we've got some great questions that have been given to us on Twitter as well. So we'll get through the games with as much conciseness, if that's such a way of saying it, as we possibly can. Friday night football, Newcastle 1, Leeds 1. I didn't get to watch this.
Oh, you missed out, mate. It was great.
I did hear it was kind of quite end to end. Talk to me here. There's two things.
Because I didn't watch it live. I recorded it and was about an hour and a half behind everyone else, phone off, all that stuff. Only Friday night, you have to watch that fucking shit. I was like, babes, we don't miss Leeds. It's just the rule. We don't miss Leeds United. The second quarter of the first half, the second half of the first half, so the second quarter of the game was unbelievable.
Basketball.
They just didn't stop for 20, 25 minutes because Leeds dominated the start of the game and it looked like we were going to rip Newcastle apart. But the problem was obviously Leeds defensively is makeshift, right? With Luke Ayling does a good job for him when he plays at centre back. You've got Dallas at right back. You pulled him out of midfield. Firpo's new at left back. Cooper, I actually thought played really well. I'm not a big fan of him. I thought he went under the radar and had a great game for Leeds actually. But they give you chances, right?
Yeah.
So once Newcastle were like, well, we're going to get battered here. Let's get it into St. Maximin and start running at them. And that was it. It was like, get it to St. Maximin, run. Get it to Rafinha, run. It was just joyful to watch. And the game kind of died out a little bit once Rafinha went off. And actually then it looked like St. Maximin might go on and win the game for Newcastle. I mean, probably fair result in the end. But yeah, it was joy to watch. You cannot miss. If Leeds are on the telly, don't miss it. It doesn't matter who they're playing. I just watched them. This is so much fun. But it's part fun because they're fucking useless at the back as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're playing them this week on Saturday coming. And it's a 3:00 kickoff. I'll be able to watch it, of course. I'm always fearful with Leeds because they can go toe-to-toe and beat anyone on their
absolutely.
day. But we beat them twice last year.
And well in both games.
And what I've seen this season of our ability to break the high press is actually quite good. So I'm actually going into it with confidence with Antonio back as well. That I think we are probably favourites and we should be winning this game. But it's going to be an enjoyable game to watch. I know that already. So looking forward to our game.
I'm very pleased to be looking at the FPL team and see Mikel Antonio unflagged and back and ready for that game.
Yes.
It was never an option for me, what was going on last week to sell him. Never an option to know, right, Leeds, Brentford afterwards. I'm definitely going to want Mikel Antonio for those. Ironically, I'm probably happier having him for Leeds than I am for Brentford at the moment. If Rafinha is out, I cannot see them beating you, which is remarkable because, as you've just said, they are capable of going toe-to-toe. Daniel James, it just didn't work for a debut for me. I thought Click and Rodrigo were both very threatening from advanced midfield positions. Newcastle changed tactics. One of the things that kind of changed the game, Graham Jones was sat in the stand, wasn't he? Up high. And about 20 minutes into the game, he comes down to the touchline and starts barking out orders. And it's like Bruce has got his ear listening to what Graham Jones is saying. I mean, he's basically doing all the tactics in that. Yeah, I don't know if he's the manager, but he's doing all the fucking tactics. It's fairly obvious. So one of the things I'd been saying to the patrons on Friday was, look, I think they'll put Hayden back in midfield because they'll need that to be competitive against Leeds. And for whatever reason, it took Newcastle 20, 25 minutes to work that out. And then the game got a bit better for them from there. So they switched to a back four mid-game. Whether that will stick, I don't know. I know a few people gambled on St. Maximin. Well done. And you absolutely could have had more than what you got as well, actually. Watford, Wolves, Tottenham, Palace is the next four. 3 of them are away. There might be a little bit more returns in there. And I think he might be one that people are, particularly those on wildcard, might be considering him at the moment. Because there's a lot kind of short of the value at kind of a Bamford and a little bit below. St. Maximin comes under. He's like 6.6 now, isn't he? Where him and Tony are the only kind of two there. Or you're coming down Southampton, they're going to have a real nice swing of fixtures very shortly. But in that 6.5 area, you're kind of Tony St. Maximin, aren't you? And Tony's fixtures really stiffen. So for those who don't have the money in the bank and are thinking, do you know what? I know Tony did well at the weekend, but it's rough fixtures now. Starts with Liverpool this weekend. You don't have the money. Where do you go? And you look down, you go, St. Maximin's got Watford away next. That's all right. Wolves didn't look too clever at the weekend. Tottenham definitely don't look clever. Palace away. Next 4 are okay. And actually, if you look longer term, Newcastle's, after they played Chelsea in game week 10, their 3 home games in 12, 14 and 15 are Brentford at home, Norwich at home and Burnley at home, which is a very good run, actually. FPL Football will be joining me ahead of their game week 9 fixture at Crystal Palace for Clash of the Correspondents, and that's a really good run for them between game week 9 and 15. Those who've gone St. Maximin will be holding for a little bit, I think. I tell you what, he's an enjoyable player to own. That's what Si always says to us.
Until he's injured. But yeah, I get it. I do get it.
He probably will at some stage.
Tony really is a funny one. Let's move on to talk about Wolves Brentford. Tony, obviously, up before this weekend, was 1 goal in 4. And the way I looked at it, I considered moving him on. And Adam Armstrong was the one I'd go to because save a bit of money and use it elsewhere and what have you. I just looked at it and I was like, what if he'd scored 2? And then it was 2 in 4. And then there's a goal every other game. I'd be fine with that. And now he's got a goal and an assist, and that's 3 returns in 5. And that's 24 points I think he's got in total. It's like the 24 points in total over 5 games, just under 5 average from a 6.3 striker, and suddenly he's fine. And the way I looked at it was at 6.3 I'm losing value. So this difficult run of fixtures, what do I do? Well, I'm in a position where I don't mind benching him and having him as first sub. So
I would not bench him.
I get it. So, but that's my. If I was to keep him and I had 11 players with better fixtures, am I fine with him first sub? And the likelihood is with what we've seen, he may come on. So that's why I'm not making the move to downgrade Tony at the moment. This Wolves 0 Brentford 2 game. I get it. Wolves did have a lot of chances and they did create. And Traore.
Wolves wouldn't have scored if they played till Christmas.
No,
mate.
but they did create chances. And Traore, we did an interesting thing on the quiz last week, which covered the first 4 weeks. You're talking about his dribbles. He extended that even more, right? But I think I'm not drinking the Wolves Kool-Aid. I think they're going to finish bottom 5 this season. Yeah, I think they're going to finish. I don't say they're going to go down, but look, how many points do they have, James, from their first 5 games? 3?
They have 3, yeah.
It's not good enough. They haven't scored in 4 of the first 5 games.
How many have Leeds got?
Listen, we talked about Brighton
2, I think, or
last
3.
season. Yeah, I'm not drinking Leeds Kool-Aid either, mate. Those 2 clubs are ones that people will say, you know that whole phrase, they'll be all right. We talked about Brighton last season as creating so many chances and never getting the points. And they were down there for 3/4 of the season.
Did Brighton go down?
They didn't. I never said they'd go down. I said bottom 5.
Nah, I can't see
which is
that.
different. And I'm not drinking the Wolves Kool-Aid. I'm sorry. Look, people can have their opinions. They can have their opinions. I don't think they're going to go down. But I don't think they're going to be particularly good this season. And this whole thing about how many chances they're creating.
But they didn't at the weekend.
No, but up until now, it's been, someone's going to get... Look, we had a Twitter question come in.
Last week, they should have beat Watford 4-5, easy.
We had a but did they? No.
No.
So, I don't know. I'm just not buying into it yet. Now, they can prove me wrong with actual results and actual output, but at the moment, I'm not seeing it. And Brentford...
So do you remember something else? Do you remember something else in that quiz?
With their lives.
The stat on Brentford in that quiz?
Ask me again.
Second best expected goals conceded prior to this weekend.
Okay.
I don't suppose that's changed.
No.
So let's treat them a little bit seriously and give them some credit.
Yeah, and Brentford, we talked, a question that we'd had, it might have been on the Patreon Q&A, was which 3 teams are going to go down, and Watford and we said probably still the 3 that came up. I'm not buying that with Brentford now. I think Brentford actually are equipped to possibly maybe stay up. So with all that summarised, my opinion, Wolves, they're going to tick along. No interest whatsoever. Brentford, Tony stays. And that's that.
Brentford, what are they on? 8 points now?
Yeah.
Brilliant
Same
start.
as us.
Brilliant start.
Same as us.
But the next 4 are Liverpool at home, West Ham away, Chelsea at home, Leicester at home. Now, because there's 3 home games in there, I'll probably, even though they're against, I guess, top 6 teams, Leicester you might argue against at the moment. if they lose all 4 of them games, which I think if we look at it isolated, each single one, Liverpool at home, West Ham away, Chelsea at home, Leicester at home, what we expecting right now, I think honestly we're looking at that and going 1 point. Probably against Leicester. Mm-hmm. If they lose all 4, suddenly they're 8 points from 9 games. And once you're below 1 point per game, you're in danger. So this might quickly, the narrative around Brentford might very, very quickly change. I think from an FPL perspective, obviously people in debate about Tony. Now, here's my experience of how this probably works with FPL, generally speaking. He's just put in a 12-pointer, I believe, Suj. And he was outstanding. He was man of the match comfortably for me, by the way, in the fixture. I think it was outstanding. And he looks very good. If he'd have blanked on the weekend, everybody would be selling. Now, because he's had the return, I don't know. I might hold. We've looked at an alternative there. Actually, you could even make a case to go right St. Maximin to cover Newcastle's 4 fixtures. And you go back to Tony in game week 10, Burnley away, Norwich at home, Newcastle away. Might even be a way to play it. You keep your squad structure at a similar place in terms of the value of the squad. Tony's only going that way. St. Maximin at the moment's only going that way. So you might even put a little bit in the bank for you as well. But in terms of those holding, I wouldn't bench him even against Liverpool this week. He plays. He's a penalty taker, he's a talisman. There's no benching. Mbuemo or Mbumo or however anybody wants to pronounce him this week, very good again. Could have got more than the 1 goal. And he's not a buy now because of Brentford's fixtures. But he's definitely one to keep an eye on. At the moment, they're not going to change that system. And I think Thomas Frank was right. This was their best performance of the season. I'm going to, for our advanced tier patrons on Thursday, I'm going to have a closer look at what they're doing tactically. Shandon Baptiste had me swearing at the TV on Saturday lunchtime. Like, honestly, it made me lose my mind. And I didn't even give a fuck about what was going on. It made me lose my mind.
Idiot.
You dumb mudder. Honestly, what was he thinking?
Yeah. I had to teach my son a new word yesterday. Moron. I called someone a moron. And he's only 7.
That's so like 1980s or
he
something.
said to me, Dad, what's a moron?
Here you go.
Shannon Baptiste.
He's never heard it.
Oh,
the irony of he'd got booked, which it probably was a booking because his studs were showing, was a little bit harsh. You're 2-0 up. He's about to get substituted. We can say he may not have known that. But even more reason, just let your man run inside his own half. You're 2-0 up and you're going to risk your teammates putting them in that precarious situation, which the only real effort they had was Traore's cross for Jimenez's header. And Brentford defended absolutely brilliantly after the red card. And Buemo obviously hit the bar late on as well. They were excellent. We need to keep an eye on them, but it's not a buy now because of the 4 fixtures. But I think by the time we get to the end, as we go into game week 10, then we've got we'll have seen them play half the teams then. We'd have seen them play the best teams, the middle teams, the shit teams. We'd have seen a little bit of everything from Brentford. And I think we can make a real judgment case for them. I reckon Tony will be very, very popular come game week 10. Very popular. And I don't blame anybody who holds on to him at the moment. He's talisman. He will continue to be. I'm certain of that. Wolves, just to kind of argue against your point and a few notable things. They were bad at the weekend, but it's worth saying that Brentford had higher XG against Wolves than the other 4 teams who played them previously combined. I realise there's a penalty in there, but even still, it's quite close. Marcel had a bit of a nightmare.
After I bought him in Sky, not that that's a different show, but yeah.
Plenty of people would have bought him in an FPL, and I can understand why, obviously, following the return the week before. He's wrestling on Tony, which he was first warned for, came back to obviously bite. Tony, by the way, has never missed a penalty for Brentford, 100% conversion rate. I think the scary bit is, for those who've gone in on Wolves players, that they could now move to the back 4. That might come as early as the Carabao Cup tie with Tottenham on Wednesday. And I don't think Marcel's secure anyway after that particular performance. No one's suggesting you should move him on. You should keep at the moment. But I think you should be aware that this could become a problem quite quickly with Ryan Aït-Nouri waiting in the wings. For Nelson Semedo owners, there's no concern. But a little bit like what we've stressed previously is, or as said on Black Box, all fart, no poo. That's a little bit what Nelson Semedo feels like he could be actually at the moment.
Feels a little bit like Wolves could be, mate.
Raul Jimenez, the discarding of the headband that many of you would have seen very late in the game was a little bit concerning, because he can't do that. He's got to play with it.
Right.
And Bruno Lage said after the game that it is bothering him.
Right.
So that's that. We've spoken about.
Does he have to play with it forever?
I don't know.
Okay.
He's obviously suffered a horrendous injury.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the way he leapt for that header that I mentioned earlier towards the end of the game was promising. Like he could have scored in that moment, and it might be that's what Bradley Parker keeps saying. Just needs that one goal that's going to turn it. I think where you're at with Wolves right now is you've got what you've got. Keep what you've got. There's at least 2 more good fixtures. Then there's a tougher run of 5 before the really kind of good fixture run ends, all the way up to 14. But we know they don't play any of the so-called, let's say, big 7 if we include Leicester, until they play Liverpool at home in game week 15. But I think with Watford and Brentford now gone, we go back to a no-buy situation here with Wolves. Trincao, Traore owners, I think, will already be concerned. And Traore has kind of held up to what my opinion was, that actually these so-called easier games on paper are not necessarily better for him, because there's less run for him to run at people on the counter-attack, because teams are setting up with more people defensively.
Talking about 5.5 midfielders, because we were mentioning Bueno earlier. Arsenal away win 1-0 at Burnley, and a 4-1-4-1 with 2 10s in Odegaard and Smith Rowe.
Basically.
And if Odegaard is Arsenal's 10 at 5.5 million, and let's say they played some more difficult games than Burnley, as we do say, no disrespect to Burnley, but if they decide to drop 2 in, maybe Smith Rowe's the one that makes way for a 4-2-3-1. Then Odegaard at 5.5, he's going to get a bit of attention because he scored the goal, obviously, and he picked up maximum bonus points, so it's a good return. But I to be honest with you, when he entered the game, I didn't look at his price twice. And when I clicked on it before today's pod and saw it was 5.5, I was like, oh, it's an alternative to Conor Gallagher. It's an alternative to someone.
Is it, if I said to you now, buy one, which one are you buying? Oh, look at you with recency bias.
It's more, do you know what? I don't have the information. The reason being, my 5.5 million midfielder, which is my 4th midfielder slot, could rotate with Ivan Toney. And I could play a 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2. So the question then is, and also I've got defensive, like Luke Ayling, there's another one that it could rotate with in a 3-4-3 or a 4-4-2. I don't know the fixture rotation between Arsenal and Leeds, or Arsenal and Brentford, or Crystal Palace and Leeds Crystal Palace. So I can't answer that, but I don't think it's a bad price. That's what I'm saying.
Please don't leave Tony out in any fixture.
Okay.
I mean it. Please don't. Please don't. What are you going to do? You're going to leave Tony out against Liverpool and play Odegaard against Tottenham instead?
Well, that's an example where it's much of a muchness. So I would play Tony ahead of Odegaard. But if Odegaard was playing Norwich and Tony was playing, I don't know, West Ham or even Everton or
the only other one, let's look
Palace.
Game week 8. Tony's got Chelsea at home. Odegaard's got Palace at home.
It's a better fixture for Odegaard, no doubt about it.
You play Tony, mate. Even against Chelsea. Play Tony.
He was good at the weekend, don't worry.
Don't leave a forward out like that. Those who listen to my deadline stream will know this is a principle of mine. If you have a forward like that, you do not leave them out, irrespective of fixture, especially one that's a penalty taker and, as I said, does not miss penalties.
Yep.
You leave him in. You are quite right to highlight in terms of Arsenal formation. My dad streamed this game legally. Go and get him if you want. So I relied on him for a little bit of information on this, but of course his Tottenham bias took over and he told me that Arsenal were a bit lucky. What the story tells me deeper is that Arsenal were far the better side in the first half, and Burnley, as we would expect with Arsenal not killing the game, put a bit of pressure on in the second. Depending on who you listen to, Ben White was either magnificent or had a nightmare. It really is split opinion on him. It seems to have gone neither one way or the other. There's no middle ground. There's he made some errors. It was either he was brilliant or he was shit. He was obviously at fault for the back pass, which led to the penalty, which was cancelled by VAR, which I think was the correct call. I spoke about this last week on one of the shows we did about for Arsenal at the moment, what they've got to do is play high up the pitch. So what you don't want to do is Ben White to be physical with a Chris Wood and him being in the penalty area, because then it drops down anywhere and shit can happen. What I did say was that he's not going to win all the headers. If Arsenal can be high up the pitch, Burnley don't have people who will run behind. Now, if Tottenham play a diagonal on Sunday at Arsenal, it might be if Kane wins the first header, you've got Sonny coming from the left, and we know that's not how Tottenham set up yesterday, and we'll go into that in a bit. But they'll probably revert to type at Arsenal on Sunday. So there's a different challenge there. If Kane can pull towards that left side, if Sonny's going to come in off it and run behind, that's potentially a different test. But the higher Arsenal stay, the better they will be, and the better they will be for Ben White. Kieran Tierney, as we've kind of been predicting, and as part of, obviously bought him last week, going to be really high. Tomiyasu much deeper. There's going to be a real bias towards Arsenal's offensive play down the left-hand side. I would say to you, Tottenham have got a weakness defensively down the right-hand side, but I just think Tottenham have got weaknesses defensively, full stop. I might have told people not to buy Tottenham defensive players. Anyway,
probably about 2 years of that, mate.
I think this 4-1-4-1 probably sticks for Arsenal.
For the easier games.
And I think
tougher games, they'll go back to 4-2-3-1.
I think they'll play that again against Tottenham. And I think one of the reasons why this system might have changed is part in relation to trying to protect Ben White a little bit, is if Partey can screen in front, and the two, let's say, offensive central midfielders are a little bit further up the pitch, it also means Arsenal can start with more offensive players in higher positions to start with. I think that probably sticks. Pepe was getting a lot of shouts on my deadline stream, and I kept saying, I'm not convinced he'll even play, to be honest. But actually, in this system, which allows Smith Rowe and Odegaard both to play central, he probably stays in. Should it change, like what you're saying, they bring in, say, Lokonga to play against Tottenham, because I think Xhaka will still be suspended, won't he? So that's the other point. It might be something that only sticks for one game, i.e. the Tottenham game. And then when Xhaka's fit, having just signed a new contract, he's not going to come back in the team, or they're not going to play Thomas Partey. So I think it probably is a short term, maybe. You might be right. It's just one more game possibly against Tottenham at the weekend. And then it might be that it goes back to a 4-2-3-1. But the right thing for Arsenal to do is, if they were to win convincingly in the derby on Sunday, stick with it. Yep. Good fixtures to come afterwards. Brighton, Palace. That system, they'll probably have some problems against Brighton. But otherwise, Palace, Villa, even Leicester, Watford, decent.
Yep.
I think Arsenal players should have our attention. I feel like I've bought the best Arsenal prospect at the moment in Kieran Tierney. Aubameyang is a no. Saka, Odegaard, Smith Rowe, Pepe I wouldn't go near. But the others, depending on your fancy, they're just not for me at the moment from a fantasy perspective.
No. Burnley? Also an avoid. Having 1 point from 5. Difficult start. I mean, they've had Liverpool and Everton and Arsenal and Leeds in the last one. They're difficult. They're not easy games. If you don't turn up, you can easily get turned over in all of those fixtures. By the time we get to Chelsea in game week 11, they need to be at what we talked about earlier, 1 point a game minimum. So that will mean taking another 9 points from the next 5. You can see them doing it, couldn't you?
I feel like Burnley notoriously start seasons quite slow, is my opinion. And we've been kind of repeating weekly on this podcast. Let's have a look again once they've got the first 6 out of the way, because this time next week, I'm sure someone's going to put in the questions, what about Chris Wood? Well, that's because they've got Norwich at home in game week 7. I can understand why people are looking. Burnley's 4 home fixtures from game week 7 to game week 13 are Norwich, Brentford, Palace and Tottenham. Is that good or bad? Palace might be better than we thought originally. Brentford look better than we thought originally. Tottenham might be the easiest of those 3 fixtures from an offensive proposition. I'd say that part in jest, in all seriousness. But obviously Norwich in game week 7 will appeal. I can't see me going near them at the moment, Burnley. Just a no.
You mentioned the team that might be better than we thought, and that is, you're right. I mean, Crystal Palace, we'll move on to Liverpool 3, Crystal Palace 0. I would saying I'm starting to believe the hype is probably an unfair statement, because there was no hype around Crystal Palace. But put it this way, I think Palace will finish above Wolves. In relation to my comment earlier, I think Palace will finish, but they gave Liverpool they gave Liverpool a game, and I know the scoreline says 3-0, but they did give Liverpool a game, and there's a lot of teams that will get turned over by Liverpool this season. Judging by the stats, mind, it did seem to be a game that passed Conor Gallagher by, and he's the only Palace asset that I was majorly looking at, to be honest with you. Didn't have much involvement in the game in terms of defensive work or offensive work.
I watched quite a bit of this game. I'll tell you one thing that was interesting. Palace had a free kick on the edge of the box and Gallagher didn't take it. You know who took it? It'll make you laugh.
MacArthur.
No. Jordan Ayew.
Okay. But he's not going to stay in the team.
Well, exactly.
I don't think he's going to stay in the team.
There is part of that, so don't look too much into that. And I think we can expect possibly as early as Monday Michael Elise possibly to come into that team, another substitute appearance in this game. And as soon as odds on Edouard come on, he looks like he's going to get into positions and score. One touch, I think we tried to control it in the box. I just thought, just hit it on the half volley, mate, because the control had to be so precise to bring it under his spell. Palace had a really good little spell at 1-0. You could feel the tension around Anfield that they were a little bit worried. And part of that might have been because of personnel for Liverpool, right? No Robertson, no Alexander-Arnold, Konate making his full league debut. I think that's part where the nerves came from. It would be very disappointed from a Palace perspective that Liverpool's 3 goals basically all came from corners, right? That's if they outplay you and beat you, accept that. You don't want to be losing like that. Salah's given MacArthur the slip on the first goal. The second goal, obviously Salah comes around the back. They're kind of untypical Salah assist and goal moments, actually. And the third one, admittedly, is just a great strike from Naby Keita, who I loved his I'm going to stand there like Eric Cantona pose, but he couldn't hold it. He broke out into a smile after about 3 seconds.
I did a goal.
Really, really great strike. But not too damaging for Palace. Like, anything they got in this fixture would have been a bonus.
Yeah.
Their big game is obviously on Monday night against Brighton at home. I think Gallagher, as kind of said last week, if you want to buy, and for most people it's going to be to enable something else, you can do it at any point. Because he's going to be on some of the set pieces, etc.
Yeah.
I think Edouard and Elise are 2 players really to keep an eye on ahead of the game week 9 fixture at home to Newcastle. And Palace's defensive numbers are showing up okay at the moment. I think Tyreek Mitchell is another one that potentially should be on a watch list. For Liverpool, what do we do with Jota, Suj?
Hold until it becomes a problem, right? He's still starting. He's still in amongst it. He could easily have returned at the weekend. For now, it's a hold. And he's gone up in value at the moment, right?
Roberto Firmino, training.
Fine. Deal with it when it's a problem. Like, we've got a couple of weeks away from this fixture swing for a few other teams, so I'm holding for now. I don't think it's a problem yet, and he can return in the last 20 minutes of games. We've seen it time and time again.
Yep.
I'm holding for now.
Yeah, I was definitely hold this week with Brentford away, which again, for the umpteenth time, it obviously looks a more difficult fixture this week now. He stays this week. Firmino's in training. I think if Jota doesn't start at Norwich in the Carabao Cup on Tuesday night, you're probably green light to be okay for the Brentford fixture. Trent, just while I remember, he's not going to play at Norwich, but there's no COVID issue or anything. He should be fine for the coming weekend, you would anticipate. Although predicting how long someone's sickness might last is
difficult. Was he
on the toilet for 2 days, 4 days? We don't know, do we? We just know that he's not well. But I guess he'll be okay for the weekend. Jota's hold now. I think they've got Porto in the Champions League, I want to say next Tuesday. Sounds right. They played
Wednesday last time, so
and then
Tuesday
they've obviously got Manchester City at home in game week 7. And I think in Klopp's mind, Firmino's still the first choice, isn't he? The front three, I think, if Liverpool are Champions League final tomorrow, I don't think Jota starts. Yep. That's my opinion. So I think you're probably looking at minutes for Firmino in some form at the weekend. Remember, it's not impossible. Mane or Salah could get rested. And then Firmino to probably come back in for Porto to be ready for Manchester City, because they'll probably have it tactically in mind to get Firmino around Rodri, assuming Rodri plays that particular fixture. And Firmino's one of the best in the business, obviously, as a defensive forward. So it could be that he's the one that goes for me in 7, but I'd have no thought to sell him this week unless he was injured.
Yep.
And he's been frustrating to own, but what you can't do is, it's all about, we say it so many times, it's about the decision process, and quite how Jota has ended these 2 games with 6 points is staggering. The miss, if you haven't seen it, I take it you've seen the miss.
Yeah.
He scores that 99 times out of 100.
Trust the process and the decision-making process rather than the outcome, for sure. You mentioned Rodri there. It's a great segue into Man City, Southampton. Thank you to Manchester City for making our away point and 0-0 yesterday against Southampton actually look half decent, because Southampton now have held United, they've held us, and it's not my bias saying we're a good team, but we gave them a game, and they've now held Man City. Poor, tired, having to travel, Man City. I feel so sorry for them. It's difficult, I know, to play 2 games in a week, but poor Man City.
Had a fucking disaster PR week, mate. Honestly,
I think that in the same way that Palace are better than I thought they would be, Southampton are now showing that they might be as well. The biggest takeaway for me, I didn't pay the extra 0.1 on Livramento over Brandon Williams, and I regret it now. But I do think, were I wildcarding now, I just find that extra 0.1, because I do think they feel all right at Southampton. City had an off. That's why City, I don't think I'm going to win the league this year now.
Let's do Southampton first, because otherwise we could get in a spiral here about Manchester City. Southampton, you're going to hear talked about more and more in the next couple of weeks, because they had a rough start of fixtures, and they've still got Chelsea away in game week 7, which is obviously a very, very tough fixture. You're not expecting it. But for the likes of Livramento, a little bit like this weekend, you're not planning to start him, obviously. For those who got him off the bench this week, it's happy days with the 5 points. Exactly.
Yeah.
You earn your own luck in this game sometimes. And that's why you should have the playing 4.1 rather than the non-playing 4.1, for example. And he looks an absolute lock at the moment. No, we knew Shimikas was short-term, Suj. We're talking about Livramento, obviously. Their run of fixtures from 8 to 12 is absolutely brilliant. It's actually not that uncomparable to Chelsea's 7 to 11. Southampton play Leeds at home, which looks a great offensive fixture at the moment. Burnley at home, Watford away, Villa at home, Norwich away. That's 3 of Chelsea's 5. And the other 2 fixtures, Leeds at home, Villa at home. Looks decent. We really will be talking about these in detail, I think, heading into game week 8, Southampton. Armstrong really appeals as interesting at the value, I think. I think some people are considering going now. And again, if it enables, I don't have a problem with that, particularly after what we saw from Wolves at the weekend, being unsure how they're going to play defensively. They're the 2. Livramento's obvious defensively. If you want to get, absolutely fine. I wouldn't go forcing it. Like, my take on it at the moment is that if I pay 4.2, 4.3 for him, that's what I pay for him. I don't have a problem with that. Armstrong's the one I've really got an eye on ahead of that Leeds fixture in game week 8. System-wise, they did not play the same as they played against Usage. It was more commonly what we'd expect from a Southampton team with 2 wide forwards, basically, in Redmond. Elianusi, for the majority of the game, played back in a wider position but allowed to come off it. And Adams played with Armstrong again. So I'm a little bit confused about it, in the sense, was the West Ham game a one-off? Because I felt like it was part in prep for Man City.
Probably a one-off because of the impact of players coming back from the international break and what have you, with Adams and Adams being benched, maybe a couple of others. So, yeah, I think that more than anything else, mate.
Players to return, they're worth a watch. Man City, as I said, Guardiola has had a PR disaster this week with the we need more fans in the ground. And then, the comment at the weekend about having 10 minutes preparation compared to Southampton's week. If he really wants anybody to feel sorry for him, I don't even think Man City fan walked out the ground and went, "Oh, fuck me, we only had 2 days to prepare for Southampton."
We only scored
nonsense.
6 goals midweek. We only scored 5 goals the week before.
You know what that does for me? It psychologically, I think he's struggling, Guardiola. And I think he's struggling because he's looked at Lukaku, Ronaldo, Salah, and knows he doesn't have that player.
Well, De Bruyne's not fit fully.
But De Bruyne is not going to be the
20 goals a season.
Well, the other 3 could get 30, couldn't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah. Ronaldo's 4 in 3. He's been here a week, mate.
Yeah, but he's played 2.5 shit teams. Don't start or come back at me. I realise I deserve the comeback now. City FPL. Now, we're not buying now because Chelsea away, Liverpool away. And if you ask me right now, I think City might lose both games. and then they're already chasing.
Yeah.
Johnny Pringle's spoken to us before, kind of once you feel that kind of 7 points behind Liverpool, no matter what stage it is or so,